Hey all, it's your girl Aaron, and today I wanted to talk about theories of value. I'm not going to get too technical. This is more like just my own thoughts on value in general, but there's been various different ideas about value in the past, philosophically. I think we're specifically talking about economic value here, though, not like the abstract sense of you value your friends, for example. So in the economy, value is basically how much things are worth. And so if you've got people making things and then you've got other people making use of those things, then you can look at, like, was the thing that was made did it actually have value to the person, and then in like capitalism and in economies that have markets, well, in those cases value becomes like almost like a hyper focus, a very important thing, because markets force you to compare things to each other. And so when you're comparing like one thing to another, when there's an exchange happening and you need to try and make sure that the exchange is fair, that you give as much as you get, for example, then you kind of really want to know how valuable each individual thing is, so that you can make sure that you're doing the right kinds of trades, I guess. So I guess if you didn't have money, you could compare things like X number of apples are worth Y number of oranges, but it would kind of get a little bit too complicated quickly, because there's just too many things that you might want to compare to each other. And so money is actually a more efficient way of handling trade, like at an economic scale, because it lets you define the value of a thing and then use that to compare to the value of other things. And you don't need like a lookup table of like how much of these things are worth how much of those things. So there are people who are like against the use of money, but then they think the solution is for us to go to trade. That's a bit naive, I think, because trade is what we're doing with money. It's just that money is making the trade easier. And going back to like a lesser technology, but still based on exchange, it's not really going to help us. And human beings tend to prefer to optimize things and take whatever shortcuts they can. So in no time at all, people will just be like, yeah, this is way too much trouble, just go back to using money. Now, when you have money, there's different theories about, like, let's say like a product, like let's make it like a cell phone. There's different theories about what the value of it really is. Now, I don't want to get into like the specifics of the economic theories, because I do want to tackle it from more of a high level outline view. And I think it's actually like a lot simpler than some people try to make it out to be. So I think it's fine for people to just think about it and just make a list of, like, so one of the things that would cause you to place a value on an object is if it required labor to make it. So if it takes you, I don't know, 3 hours of labor to put together a smartphone, somebody would have to sell their labor in order to do it. And so when the capitalist is selling the phone, they would want to make back the money that they spent paying someone to work, so they would have to at least include the labor. Now, there would also be the cost of the resources, like, you know, so I guess if you go back to, like, let's say like the original mines or whatever, you know, the property where the mine is on, I don't know how much value that would, you know, that investment to own that property, and then the mines, like, you'd have to hire people to go and mine. So some people make a case that the only thing that you should look at is the labor, because, you know, it all comes down to labor, like getting the resource out. But like, that was maybe true like a while ago, but things have changed and now there's a lot of automation happening. And so if a robot is doing the labor, the robot doesn't have to sell its labor, it's just a machine that will function given the right electricity and maintenance and stuff. Furthermore, you see things like banks, you know, giving loans and stuff, and there's like Federal Reserve system and the way money comes into your economy, and really old money gets taken out. And so when the bank is like issuing new currency or whatever, there's no labor behind that value, that's just getting put in there. We can also look at stuff like capital gains. So if you buy a certain property and then X number of years later you sell it and you sold it for way more, because, you know, prices tend to go up, well, that's called inflation, and when capitalism is functioning as it wants to, that's something that is happening. It's like this feature, it's pretty weird. So yeah, so that value, the money there, you know, so if you were to sell your labor for 10 years and you earned like what, like 100k a year, just for simplicity's sake, and after 10 years you've made $1 million. So let's say you bought a property for $500,000 and then 10 years later you sold it for $1.5 million. So by doing nothing, by literally just sitting there, the property's made as much money as somebody who worked full-time for the same amount of time. So that's another place where, you know, you can say that there hasn't really been labor to blame for that profit. And the same is true with stuff like rental income. You know, like, it doesn't take labor to maintain, or it might, usually the tenant's responsible for keeping the place tidy and stuff, and if there are repairs needed, then the landlord can, or should be, the one fixing it. But apart from like the maintenance side of it, like, let's say everything's going fine, there's nothing breaking, you're still paying rent even though there's no labor involved in it. So yeah, so just from like a overview, like high level outline approach, I don't think it's helpful to say that labor is the only thing that causes value. But so to some degree it is also up to how much people are willing to pay. So there's like these competing forces where on the one end you have the consumers who are trying to pay as little as possible for as much product or quality, quantity, whatever it is, of stuff. And then on the other end you have the producers who want to make the most amounts of money by, you know, releasing the least amounts of product with the least amount of labor involved. So they try, in both cases, you're trying to maximize your own amount of money you have relative to other stuff. So and so these competing forces, they operate in the market. So the market is where you offer, your goods and services. What makes it a market is because it's based on exchange. So if you had like 10 people who all like were farming in a community, and then every month they got together and they shared the produce with each other for free and stuff, it might look like what we call a market, but in the economic sense of the word, that wouldn't be a market. Because like even if they had all their tables set out and they were walking around like choosing what they wanted from each other's tables, like we wouldn't call it a market in the economic sense, because there is no exchange happening. And so when you were going, if it's for free, and you look at the person's table and you're like, well, I really like your apples, can I have a couple? And they're like, yeah, sure, have some. Now if you add exchange to it, it becomes the economic word for market, where now you have to compare, because things are not being given for free, they're being sold. So if you go to the table and you want the apple, they're going to be like, well, the apple is 10 monies, and then you will have whatever monies you have, and you'll be like, should I get the apple for 10 monies, or should I go there and get a banana for 20? I can get 2 apples or 1 banana. Well, the oranges are pretty cheap. I can get 3 oranges instead of the banana. And so that's what I mean, where like it forces you to compare things, because it's no longer about like what you want, it's about what you want for what you have to give. So it's a two-way comparison, not just what you want, but also you have to do these calculations of, okay, I have this, and because everyone has a limited amount of money, they can't just go in and say, can I have everything please? So now if things were being offered for free, if somebody came and said, can I have everything please, then people would have to be like, no sweetie, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work for us, because it becomes a social issue. So the person requesting everything, if everyone else was like, yo, I have so much food, I don't know what to do with it, I'm like super full, I'm not hungry, whatever, just can someone just take this food off my hands? And if that's how everyone felt, then someone saying, hey, can I have everything, like you'd be like, oh awesome, we can go home because like we're not wasting our food now, someone's going to put it to use. But if there were other people who also wanted, then you'd have to say no, like let's look at who needs what. Like the one asking for everything, like what's the need there? And like let's say they were like, well, I'm trying to make a YouTube video where, you know, I throw like fruits off a cliff and watch it splat or whatever, and other people are like, well, we're kind of hungry and we were going to actually eat the food and use it to stay alive. So then socially you'd be like, cool, well, let's get the people who are hungry their food and see if there's any extra left over for the YouTuber to splat. So you solve that distribution problem socially. So what capitalism does is, or what markets do, is they replace that problem solving by saying, well, it's whoever has the money can get the thing, and it's first come first serve. And if there's like a lot of people who want something but there's only a few of those things, then you know, you raise the price of it so that only the people who are willing to or can afford to spend a lot of money will be able to get it, and then everyone else who wanted it can't because they don't have enough money, or their calculation, you know, they're like, well, now that the apples are more, well, now I definitely want to get oranges, so they change their mind based on that. Whereas, like, let's say, going back to the non-market situation, let's say somebody had like texture or taste issues, like maybe they're autistic and they're like, I straight up cannot eat banana, like it just makes me freak out. So let's say there was people who wanted fruit, and some car here is like just stopped. So you had two people who both wanted fruit. They both, let's say you had like one apple left and one banana left. So one person was like, well, apple's my favorite. I can eat bananas, but like I really like apples. And the other one was like, well, I literally cannot eat bananas. Like, so in that case, you'd say, okay, well, the person who can't eat banana, like, let's let them have the apple so that both people can get food. So that, you know, it's like the distribution gets solved through looking at needs in the social context, and that's why you can call it a cooperative economy, because you are cooperating with each other about what to produce and how to distribute it, and it's not up to you know, money or how much money you can make of it, or whether you can beat, you know, your competition, etc. So yeah, so now you get something called use value and then something called exchange value. These are terms. Now, some famous philosophers, they've expressed that you can have an object can have both. So I disagree with that. But the cell phone, they would say, well, the exchange value, that's how much it's on the market for. That's how much someone who makes it, or even someone who's selling it secondhand, that's how much they are wanting in exchange for giving it to you. So, sorry. And so the cell phone might have an exchange value of 1,000 monies or whatever. Now the use value, that, you know, is in theory supposed to be what usefulness does it give to me. So I can go on the internet, I can record videos, I can message my friends, you know, I can have some cool apps and stuff. And so I went like kind of the wrong way, I think. But I'll see how it goes. And so yeah, the usefulness of this doesn't look good. This road that I'm on is like a one-way. So yeah. So the usefulness of an object describes what it can do for you. So now, so some people say that an object or whatever can have both, and so I disagree with that, because I think that the way humans' brains work is that once you have an exchange value in mind for a particular thing, it sort of kind of overrules your personal perception of the value of the object. So what I mean by that is, if somebody walked up to you and they just handed you a cell phone, and you'd never seen one before, so you know, you'd no idea how much, you know, how much it sold for or exchanged for. All you knew was like, here's this device in my hand that can do XYZ. So then you would really think of it in terms of its use value, because you'd be like, well, here's my phone that does XYZ for me. And if someone were to come up to you and say, well, you know, how much would you exchange it for, you wouldn't know how much labor went into it. You wouldn't know how much like profit margin was added on, how much any investments or resources cost. So yeah, so you would have to say to the person, like, I don't know, something that can do all the same stuff for me, I guess. You know, so you wouldn't have like that value in mind. Then if the person says to you like, okay, well, how about I'll give you 1,000 monies for it, and now even if, like, let's say you like turn them down because you really like your phone or whatever, but you go to the shops and you see a really cool dress and you're like, wow, that dress is really awesome, maybe I should get it. And then you look at the price and you're like, okay, it's 100 monies, so 10 of these dresses is the same amount of monies as my cell phone, so this dress is like 10% valuable as the cell phone. And that calculation that I just mentioned, like, maybe somebody can do some scientific studies on it and stuff. I have seen studies that suggest what I'm thinking is correct though, but I don't have one that like proves exactly what I'm saying. But like I'm pretty confident that that calculation is going to happen automatic, and that you will never be able to think of the cell phone without also including its value. So it's like putting a sticker on the phone mentally, that every time you mentally pick up the phone you see the sticker of how much it's worth. So that's why I would say the use value and the exchange value can't coexist, because as soon as you know the exchange value of something, you can't think, well, here's my device that I talk to my friends on and go on the internet with. You like will now start thinking, here is my phone that's as valuable as 10 dresses that can help me go on the internet and talk to my friends. It like combines your use value and exchange value into one perception in your brain. You can't really divide it, because you can't forget about the exchange value. So it's always going to be there. Like, okay, maybe if you did forget, you know, although the problem with capitalism is like, because everything has an exchange value, like if you knew how much CPUs cost and screens cost and cameras cost, you might, and labor, you might extrapolate a value for it, you know, you might. So yeah, in this hypothetical vacuum where you had no idea about how much any of these things cost, then the phone wouldn't have that. You wouldn't be able to remember or think of a sticker or a value on it, just what it did for you. And so when we talk about economies, I think that is the key. I think that this is the core foundational reason why capitalism causes competitiveness, why it incubates competition, because, you know, it is the thing that allows the comparisons. It is the thing that places objects in comparison to each other, because without money, like a cell phone and an address, like it's intangible, you know, the difference in value. Like, yeah, being naked sucks, but like if I already have a bunch of dresses, then another one's not that valuable to me, you know, like and the same, you know, like with the phone, like, you know, like how valuable is talking to your friends or going online compared to wearing a dress? Like, maybe you don't like dresses, and so it's way more valuable to you, and maybe someone else doesn't like technology. The dress is way more valuable to them, and it really comes down to like the social factor. But so I think that if we want to get away, okay, so another concept to just pop in is like somebody who's really good at making money, which we can call capital, or, you know, we could call them a capitalist. You can call someone a capitalist because they're rich. You can call someone a capitalist because they really like capitalism. You can call someone a capitalist because they believe it's a good ideology. But in the same way, you can call someone like an electrician. You wouldn't call someone an electrician if they weren't good at doing electrician stuff. So you can also call someone a capitalist because they're good at playing the capitalist game. And I would argue that that would be somebody who is really good with those calculations of value, who can spot ways of maximizing the gains they make. And I think if we were to remove the exchange value from objects, and you could only think of them in their usefulness or the social need of them, someone who was really good at meeting the social needs would be called like a socialist. So like, if you think about, okay, cool, it's coming to Christmas time, and some people buy presents, and so, but even if you don't and whatever, but you might know someone, or maybe you are someone yourself who likes giving gifts, but not just any gift. You like it to have a personal touch to it, because, you know, it's like more meaningful if, you know, it's like, it shows that you are important to someone if they know you well enough to know what you want or need, and you know, and they go out of their way to help you meet that need. Some people are really good at that, and I would argue that those people, you know, are kind of going to be the best socialists, because they like, or, you know, that type of action makes you a socialist, makes you an expert at meeting social need. Like, there's going to be people who are really good at identifying what people want or need and meeting it, and those people will be called socialists, in the sense of being an expert at it, the same way you can call capitalists an expert in making money. So yeah, so like, I think that if we want to get away from a competitive economy, then I think we need to get rid of the exchange value associated with objects. And one of the sayings that sort of fits into this is the concept of no ethical production under capitalism, because you know, capitalism, it's always made by exploiting labor, or exploiting like the earth for natural resources, or exploiting like the class systems, you know, monetary systems, kind of like how like the stock exchanges are making money but not really doing anything. They're not adding any value to anything. like they're not contributing anything of substance to society. So yeah, so like some people, they hear the phrase like no ethical consumption under capitalism, and to them that makes them think, well then, you know, well, consumption is always going to be unethical because we live in capitalism, so it's all unethical. Well, let's just consume because what can we do? Like, you got the wrong message then. Because what it should make you think, in my opinion, is okay, then that means we need consumption to happen outside of capitalism in order for it to be ethical. You shouldn't just give up on wanting to have ethical consumption just because consuming under capitalism is unethical. It's meant to show you how important it is that your consumption takes place outside of capitalism, because then it's ethical. So then you might be asking yourself, well, how can consumption happen outside of capitalism? And I would argue it can only happen if production is outside of capitalism. And that means how it's made and whether it's made for exchange or for a market or not. Because like, even if like everyone is contributing their labor and resources for free, if you then sell it afterwards, it's still going to be made to make money. That's still what its purpose is, because if it doesn't sell, then like it's like you haven't really cashed in on all that effort. So if you're producing something to exchange it, production for exchange, then it's going to have that metaphysical, like metadata of its economic value based on exchange value. And so I would argue if you are producing things not for exchange, then so maybe you are growing your own food, like you grow potatoes in your backyard or something, and then the intention is to eat them. The intention is to like eat them or to give them away to people for free or whatever, but it's not to exchange them. It's just for like, hey, I need potatoes, I want potatoes, let's make some, let's grow some. And so if you never exchange it, if it's never given that opportunity to be compared to other things, then it's like, okay, its usefulness is in what I get from it. Its value is only how valuable it is to the social need. So if the potatoes, like, so under capitalism, let's say, maybe your potatoes come out and they're like kind of gross, they don't taste that great, and but you have some good branding, and you advertise or whatever, and you get a whole bunch of people to come and to buy your potatoes and stuff, and so you make money, you cash in, you get the money from the potatoes. Success. The potatoes actually tasting crap or like not being nutritious or whatever, that's irrelevant. Sure, people might care about those things and they might choose to buy something else, but if anyone buys any of your products, that's a successful production. So the goal, it's justified when there's an exchange. But if you're not making things for exchange, then the value, like the fact that it doesn't taste good or doesn't have good nutrition, that is its lack of value being like open, like because you can't cash in on like your crappy produce, it doesn't have that metadata overruling it. Like, and the same thing can happen in the reverse. Like maybe you've got like the absolute best potatoes ever, but you sell it for like 1% what other people sell potatoes for, and effectively your potato is 1% as valuable, even if it tastes way better and is way more nutritious. So it can happen both ways, but the adding of the exchange metric warps the conception of the item and makes its value contingent on that exchange value. And so it becomes this potato is nutritious and tasty for the price, or it is not nutritious and tasty for the price. For the price is always there, unless it is never exchanged, and in that case the tastiness and the nutrition are what you judge its value on. You don't add for a price because you don't have any idea what price to add, because it wasn't made to exchange, and that isn't how you do things. And in that way, that object is not going to have an exchange value. In that way, it isn't made for capitalism. It's made for the social need. It's made to be consumed and not to be exchanged, to be used, and used straight after production, not used after an exchange. Because it's when you add the exchange that it's kind of like you corrupt the perception of value. Like a $1 billion gold-plated chicken wing or whatever, like, corrupts the value of the chicken wing. Because, you know, it might be worth absolutely nothing, because, like, you killed an animal, like, that's pretty gross. But, like, you just, like, slap a huge price on it and suddenly, like, it's warped the value of it. And it's kind of weird if you think about it, like, that humanity is, like, put this artificial, like, metadata, this artificial, like, redefinition of value, and it's literally based on, like, who has the money to pay and stuff. So yeah, like, if you can't make money off of producing something, you know, then it doesn't get made whether people need it or not. Like, how many good, awesome technologies get invented and then they never come to market because they couldn't find a way to make them profitable? But there was a huge social need. It's just maybe the people that need it are all, like, poor people, or, like, you know, like, it wasn't, like, and then the things that, like, not really anyone really needs, like a gold-plated toilet, like, maybe, you know, it gets made anyway because there's rich people who want to pay for it, even though, you know, it's not. So we've, like, chained our brains, we've, like, tricked our minds into thinking of, like, almost everything through capitalist eyes, through capitalist lenses, that paint an exchange value onto things, that forces us to make calculations, and the better we make those calculations, the more successful we get. And the calculations are around maximizing your value, like your money or your value for money or whatever, not on maximizing the meeting of needs. And so that's why I get kind of strict about when I say something is socialism or capitalism, because I'm going all the way back to this conception of production and whether it's produced for exchange or not. And it doesn't matter, like, how many workers co-ops you have. If 100% of production is being done by workers who own the means of production, like, but it's all still being sold, then we're all still making calculations, we're all still thinking about things in comparison to each other, not just their use value. It's been corrupted, and you know, we are still going to be able to say, like, the dress is 10 times less valuable than the cell phone or whatever. It doesn't matter how much worker ownership you have of the means of production, you are still on that foundation of capitalism when it's produced for exchange. Now, you do need the workers to own the means of production if you want to produce things for use, because if the workers don't own the means of production, if a capitalist owns it, they're just going to want to make a return on investment. They're not going to want to make stuff for free just because people need it. They're going to want to make their money back and make more money. And that's why, you know, the capitalist class have already chosen, by keeping their money and keeping all their means of production control, have chosen not to use it for the public good or for the social need. And the workers, they haven't made that choice yet. Now, if they gain the ownership, there's a chance that they could make it for social need. Could a capitalist make stuff for social need? Sure, but wouldn't the primary social need they would think about be their own workers, and maybe their own workers' need for agency and autonomy and equity at work? So they would, the first step they would do in towards meeting social need would be to hand over the means of production anyway. But if we're still using money and markets, then it's still not going to be free from the exchange value. It's still going to corrupt our idea of value, and we're still not going to be able to free ourselves from that way of thinking, from making those calculations. And so it's still going to end up not being focused on social need. And so socialism for me is when production is made to meet the need for use and not for exchange. So hopefully that explains it a little bit for somebody. I hope it was interesting, and thanks so much for watching. Bye.